Hi there, this is Dr. Moyer, and I am going to help describe what kind of statistical analysis is possible as you guys are to be turning in your research questions, a copy of the survey you've created, as well as your planned statistical analysis. I understand that you may not get the analysis part right, and that's why I'm going to schedule times to talk to each of you about what you submit so that we can make sure you're on the right track. Once we have met, and by meet I mean talking in person or chatting online, whatever you would like to do, or Skype, whatever we can do, whatever you can accomplish depending on how close you are, then you will have the okay to go ahead and collect data. So I've started with this statistics cheat sheet. It's posted in a couple of different places on D2L, but I did just post it under lectures or PowerPoints for this week. This truly is a cheat sheet. It indicates what kind of analysis you can do depending on what type of variable you have. So I'm always talking about whether you have a categorical or a continuous variable. And that's what you'll need to do. So the very first thing to think about with your project is when you're asking your research questions, do the items on your survey tap into the concepts that you want to look at or measure? So, for example, if you're looking at violence in relationships and whether people are happy in relationships, you have to make sure that on your survey you ask whether there's ever been violence. And you can do that in a number of different ways. And you ask how satisfied people are in their relationship somewhere so that you can compute an analysis. We haven't gone over chi-square, how to conduct them yet, or in Anova, how to conduct that as well. But I wanted you to understand that you could still select these as statistical analyses depending on what you're trying to do. And that's why I posted the PowerPoint about chi-squares and ANOVAs. And although I'm not going to go into great detail about this right now, chi-squares are used when you have two categorical variables, and it's a probability statistic. So you're wanting to know when you have two categorical variables, usually two different categories for each of the variables, you may want to know a common one is gender. Who is more likely to own a pet, males or females? So you've got gender, and then you've got a question on the survey that says, do you own a pet, yes or no? So that would be a chi-square analysis. And I've given you some examples here. These directions are for SPSS, so don't worry, I'm going to give you a different set of directions for Excel. And let me just jump ahead. So ignore this. This is not the output you'll have with Excel. That's for SPSS. But this is how you write up results. That doesn't matter whether you used Excel or SPSS. And we'll talk about that later. With an Anova, it's kind of like an independent samples t-test, except with the t-test you have a categorical variable that is the predictor, and then a continuous or dependent variable, sometimes called the outcome variable. So with the categorical variable on a t-test, there are only two categories. Sorry, my cats are playing. You can hear them banging around. My goodness. And with an Anova, you have more than two categories in the independent variable. So you might have three categories, possibly four, but that would be the most. And so you would want to know, you'd ask the question, it's usually a grouping question, which group has more or less, because you're using a mean for the outcome variable because it's continuous. and you're trying to indicate or find out who has a higher or lower mean on the variable under consideration. So, jumping ahead, again, this is SPSS, and we'll go over this in Excel, so don't worry about this output yet. There's some good examples in the PowerPoint if you need help understanding which analysis you should use. And so this is a example where different types of sports are being compared, participants that play different types of sports, how much they eat on a daily basis is being compared. And it looks like the football players eat the most. And that seems to be the case. This is how you'd write that up. Okay, ignore that assignment because that's not for you. Not this week. Oops. Okay, so back to the cheat sheet. You want to have at least 3 research questions. You should have a complete survey that includes demographic items you're going to ask. And by demographic items, I mean, oh my goodness. Here we go. I have too many files open. We have here, let me just make this bigger. Age, gender, year in school, sexual orientation, ethnicity, marital status, parental status. So these are demographic variables. They help describe the sample. And then I have a set of questions asking people, it's tapping into attachment theory. So those are those. Then there's 3 questions asking about the satisfaction in a relationship. Now all of these are going to be treated as continuous variables. And you don't have to have a bunch of them like this. This is actually a scale I'm using on another project. But you could have 1 or 2 items that tap into what you want. You know, how much did you love this partner? How many problems were there? And then you see this asks about violence. Again, it's treated as continuous because it's a Likert scale. You could pull a few of those if you wanted to know about violence. And then in the end, or in the back, I have categorical variables that ask why people chose to use verbal or physical aggression. So you can see it's yes or no, making it categorical. Now, if I wanted to know which gender was more likely to have problems in their romantic relationship, then I could conduct a t-test. So how many problems were there in this relationship? This is continuous. This would be the outcome, or the dependent variable. And gender, male or female, would be the independent variable. It's 2 categories, so it would be an independent samples t-test. I may want to also know how much someone loves their partner is correlated with how many problems they report. Both of these are continuous, so that would be okay. That would be a correlation. And if you look on the cheat sheet, it has to have 2 continuous variables. Let's just pull up the cheat sheet again. 2 continuous variables. Or let's say I do have a category, a categorical variable, asking whether people are single, cohabitating with a partner, or a part of a family, and who spends more time cooking. So I would have an item on the survey that asks them how much time they spend cooking, and then I would have an item on the survey that asks which group they belong to. That would be an Anova because there's more than 2 categories: single adults, cohabitating couples, families, and then time cooking. I also may want to know who watches more sports, males or females, because both of these are categorical variables, male, female. Do you watch sports, yes or no? Then I would have to do a chi-square. It may be the case that your questions just ask things like, me think. How many participants in the sample use technology only to communicate with their parents? So they never talk on the phone, we'll say texting or email. You would just compute the percentage and report that. And that's still statistics. It's a descriptive statistic, but there aren't like an independent or a dependent variable. There aren't those kinds. It's just a matter of calculating the frequency and reporting the percentages. And you may have to do that. You may also be reporting the mean. What is the average age at first sex for the sample? And so you would compute the mean and you would report that, and that would be answering one of your research questions. Hopefully that makes sense. Just take a stab in the dark, do the best you can on your project, submit something so I have something to work with and understand where you're going or where you want to go. And just know that as long as it contains 3 research questions, your survey that you've made should be complete, and then what you think you would have to do to answer your research questions, what statistics you would have to compute to do that, then you will get the full credit as long as it's submitted on time. It doesn't matter whether it's wrong, because we can talk about fixing that. That's why we have the consultations. So hopefully that made sense. I kind of went through that quickly, but you can watch this again if you need to. And you have these items, the cheat sheet and the PowerPoint on the Anovas and chi-squares. Sorry. I will also post that survey that I was referencing just so you can look at it. You can even use the template if you want to, put your own items in. I'm fine with that. So hopefully this makes sense. That's all.